Hey everybody, how you doing today? As you noticed from my last video, I've been trying to teach myself how to do Python. And historically, when I teach myself a computer language, I gotta find something that that I enjoy, and I have to actually make a program out of it. Okay, and so I was thinking the other day, well, what am I gonna do? And I know I'm gonna do some videos on solo role playing. And one of the things I do is I'll have a bunch of different, tabs set up on Chrome, and it'll have like, you know, roll 20 in it. It'll have my role set, things like that. Well, I'm a huge fan of the Mythic Game Emulator, and that'll always be up. And I do have an app I bought on my cell phone, but it's still, I got to roll the dice, got to do this, I got to do that. So I decided to kind of automate it with a program. And so this is the program I did the other day. I will say I'm not a big fan normally of ChatGPT writing code. Okay, not a big fan. But there were a couple of places it was easier for me to learn and to help if I asked ChatGPT to write certain segments of the code. Okay. Um, and that's kind of what I did because I'm not real good with the, I didn't know how to use NumPy. First, it's like I found out there's, no easy way. And this part's going to be a lot of typing, so I'm just going to copy and paste this from the one I've already done. So like take this for example, right? Well, there's no good way to do arrays built in natively, not arrays, but multi-dimensional arrays, matrices built within Python. You got to use NumPy basically. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to really use NumPy. And so I asked it, I said, give me a list with the categories for the odds. And it did. And it gave you a little snippet of code showing you how to interact with it. I'm like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. But the one thing I kind of liked about it is, okay, now I know how to do this because there's more than just the odds. The odds are like basically you give it a chaos factor and then you're going to give it the odds. And most of the time, like I choose 50-50 or somewhat likely, likely, unlikely. I don't normally has to be, or a sure thing. But that's one of the things you do, right? My chaos factor is based on what's been going on in the game. And so that's like a number between 1 and 9. And as you go up the chaos factor, you're more likely to get yeses. But so here's the second thing. Well, it did it. I'm like, oh, wow, that saved me actually a lot of work too. So there's other matrices that we're going to have to use, like the actual fate chart itself. Well, that would have been hellacious and a lot of debugging to do. it just spit it out for me. So, and like I said, normally I've had bad luck with Python code. You know, it seems like whatever I get from ChatGPT, it's always full of bugs, and half the time it doesn't do what I want it to do. Okay, so that's been list range and 1 through 10, and okay. So what this does is this is setting the chaos factors, right? Um, this is going to be like the columns, and then we're going to have, here's the second thing, right? Here's the fate chart values, right? So I'm not going to type this for you. I just copy and paste it. So how long would that have taken you to do? And, you know, so like I said, it just spit that out, you know, so that's kind of cool. So I was like, wow. So I used it for when I was doing the events, because when you roll 2 dice, right, you're rolling percentile dice. So don't think of when you're looking up this fate chart, these are the different values, right? That, okay, if you roll a 5, if you do this, if it does that, it's going to match up. See, this is becoming a multi-dimensional array. First, I've created a list, right, called chaos values. And now I'm going to populate that list with kind of like a sub list. Think of it as kind of what I believe NumPy is doing. And it's going to populate it with these, right? So now here is fate chart equal. So this is NumPy, NP, right? Dot array, right? And then it's going to be fate chart values. And that's it. So it's basically taking this fate chart, right? And it's creating this multi-dimensional array. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we got to write some functions. Function, what's your function, right? So we do this, and odds choice, and we're going to pass it a roll, and we're going to pass it a chaos factor. And then, oh, my eyeballs itching. Sorry, people, why itch my eyeballs? You get itchy eyeballs? I got dry eyeballs. Okay, so that right there is going to be our first function called fate check. Okay, so one of the things I want to do is make sure that we're getting a valid choice when it's sent to us, right? So we're going to say if odds choice not in odds, right? Here's our if statement. We're going to say raise, so we're going to make a value error f. Now I'll explain this valid odds. Now I'm going to explain this part right here. Where's this little squiggly line? Oh, there we go. It was hiding on me. right? And then we're going to say odds choice. And we're going to come. Right, we're going to say odds choice dot must be one of odds. So what we're doing here is we're popping up an error, right? Value error right here. That F, what that basically is telling you that this string has got like kind of, kind of code embedded within it, right? So it's going to display the odds choice and it's going to list like the numbers there, okay? So that's kind of what this part's doing. So this is just making sure that chaos factor, and we're going to do not in chaos factor. And then we're going to say raise. We're going to do the same thing again. So, you know what? Let's just copy this line and we'll put it there, and it's over too far. So let's bring it back where it should be. And we're going to say, which one? This one. Invalid chaos factor. So we'll change this one. And it's going to say chaos factor. That's one of the things I do stuff like this to save. Chaos factor. It must be 1 through 9. So let's get rid of this all the way. And 1 through 9, right? So I hit the wrong thing. And there we go. We'll want one more tab. So that's what that does. So now we're going to say row equals odds dot index. And we're going to say odds choice, and that should be good, right? So that's going to be the rows, right? So think of the rows as these things. And we come here, and this is the part of the code that I had ChatGPT help me with. And then we're going to say the column, right, equals chaos values and dot index and chaos factor. Right, so we go in, we go there. And now we're going to kind of, here's the threshold. Did I spell that right? I believe so. Equals fake chart. And we're going to say we got to put one of this. Row, column, and then that's it. We end it. I don't know why that shows up a little thing right there. Okay, and then we're going to return yes if roll equals threshold, else no. So this is going to be oh, this is why I like using the black screen instead of idle. The colors pop out a lot better. So here's the end of the function, right? So I'm going to pass it odds choice. What are my odds choice? I'm going to pass it my roll. I'm going to pass it my chaos factor. It's going to look up in the matrix that we've made, and it's going to, if there's a problem, it's going to throw an error code if I send it some garbage. But then after that, it's going to like create basically this chart. And it says if the roll equals the threshold, then it's going to be a yes. It's going to return a yes, else a no. Okay. So this is kind of how we're going to know yes or no. Now I'm going to have to figure out a way to make it, extreme yes, extreme no. But I'm not worried about that because I really don't, fiddle with, if it comes back extreme yes or extreme no. It just, it doesn't, I just don't use it that often. Okay. So now this is a part that, again, I'm going to cut and paste this part because it'd be a lot of typing. So here's my event focus table. So like I said, in the game, if you're using the Oracle, if I roll two 10-sided dice, which in order to get the events, that's why you can't do a D100. You gotta do it as two 10-sided dice. So if basically, say I roll a 1-1, if I roll 2-2, 9-9, that then I know an event's happened. So here's another list that's basically telling you, okay, if you roll a 1, I'm gonna then at that point roll another, this time a D100. I don't need it to be percentile dice. And it's going to come back with, so say an event happens and I'm going to do another roll and I'm going to call this table. And that roll, see if I get a 57, well, then I know PC negative, player character negative. So something negative happens to me. That's an event, right? Remote event, that means something goes on somewhere else. NPC action, one of the things you do when you're solo roleplay, you keep track of the NPCs. So then NPC action, boom, I roll a dice. I've got my NPCs. And if I have 6 NPCs, I roll a 6-sided dice. If it's a 4, I look at who's my 4th NPC and I know that individual does something. So maybe if it's a shopkeeper and I'm out in a dungeon, well, I find him tied up. You got to like figure this out, right? You got to sit there and say, what would make the story funner? What would make the story bigger? Tanya Pigeon came up with this. I'd love to interview her someday to find out, like, how did she like come up with this? This is another one of these. So I'll copy and paste this since I didn't write this code anyways. I mean, I fiddled with it. It didn't come back like this, but because when I got a lot of them, I prefer them, not to go 100 lines. I don't want this thing to be more lines than it really needs to be. So, so also when you roll an event, okay, you roll two random words. One's an action and one's a subject. So the action, you roll 100-sided dice, and if it's 100, transform would be the word, right? So it's not really telling you what to do. It's giving you a high level abstract, action subject sentence, and then you have to interpret that within your game. Okay, so that's all this part is. And like I said, this by the time I wrote, when I did this, because I did the events last, I had everything running, which it took me like a day to get everything running, and then it took me about a half a day to get the event section running, and then I spent the rest of the day just cleaning things up. Okay, so this is now the subject, right? This is the list of 100 words that you're going to generate that random sentence. Okay, so now we're going to create us another, what is it, kids? Function. Okay, event focus roll. So basically get the event focus roll. And for our focus in event focus table, right? So this is basically get the event focus. I give it a 1 through 100, and it's going to come back with an iterable, basically. It's going to go through each one. Okay, so it's going to, that's what R basically is, right? So it's going to go through each focus. If roll in R, return focus. Unit, and then return null. Oh, none. Oh, I got that wrong. Okay, so there we go. And let's give it, just see if we've, make sure it'll run. Okay, good. So we didn't get no errors. So that's good. Now both D10 dice are the same. It will call this code. So this is that event I was talking about. Okay, so and I don't think this is a good name for it to use, but I didn't get an error with it. So what are you gonna do, right? I didn't know if event was a reserved word. I didn't want to look it up. I mean, it's running, so with this equals random dot randent, and we're going to use this code quite a bit. So I'm basically, I got a dice here, I'm calling D100, and I'm going to get a random integer, and it's going to be between 1 and 100. right? So when this code runs, it's going to put, say, 55 in here or whatever, okay? So we're going to use that a lot, right? So we're going to say event name equals get event focus. See, we've already written that, right? And we're going to pass it to D100. Remember up here, say roll. Well, we're past, so think of that as dice roll. We're calling this function right here, and we're gonna send it the result of this, right? So it's then going to come back with the name of the event, which would be, say, off the event focus table. And I said this part I did this, I did after I did the main code. Okay, so cool. So now we're going to print it, right? And we're going to say, event. I'll make it right. Event. And then we're going to come here. We're going to add a plus. And we're going to put these two strings together. Right? So I'm going to print out a line that says event, and then it's going to put the event name there. Okay. So that's going to be the event name. Well, now we got, remember up here, move away from a thread. And you think of threads, the way I think of threads when I'm playing, are like little plot hooks, like little subplots. So you're going to move away from it, which means something's happened, something's pulling you farther from the resolution, or you're going to move closer to it. You're getting closer to solving, to tying up this thread. That's why Tanya calls it that. Think of it as threads that you weave to make your overall story. So we got that. So now we basically got to get the words. Okay. Remember I said when you got an event, you got this, and you got two words. So again, we're going to take the same D100. Right. We're going to equal random dot rand event. And we're going to 1 through 100 again, right? So we're going to roll the dice. We're going to roll it a second time. Now, I will say when I first was writing this, I had some of this code in different places. And so, like, the die would re-roll and things like that, So, because you got to remember, when you're in these little functions, you gotta realize, is this a global variable or is this a local variable, things like that. So if I had a variable here, I couldn't really interact with that specific variable outside the function, so I had to move things around. Okay, so but that's okay. So now we got to get a word that inspires the other event, right? This represents the action, so we're going to say action equals event meaning action, and we're going to pass it, not SD100. Okay, make sure, yep, I did it right. Okay, and then we're going to see another one of those weird little things, that F I was talking about before, right? So we put that F there, and we're going to say roll. And we're going to do D100. So I'm going to tell them what the number was that they rolled. And then I'm going to say action. Right, and then we're gonna do this, and we're gonna say action. Let's make this uppercase. Okay, so basically we're gonna print out, you rolled the 54, this was the action. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing again, right, for the subject. So we're gonna say D100 equals random dot randint, and we're gonna say 1 through 100. So if you're making a game, you're gonna use random in a lot, you know. So if you're making a game, any kind of game whatsoever, if it's gonna be fun, you're gonna have to add that import random. Now again, Python doesn't do it natively, right? So you got to import it. It's a pretty lightweight language, which I think is why you see it ported to so many small devices like, your Edisons, right? You can run Python in this little thing, or Raspberry Pi, if you got a Raspberry Pi and you got the Minecraft version for Raspberry Pi, you want to automate it, that's what you're going to use. You're going to use, Python. You can use Scratch, but that's neither here nor there. So what do we got? We got the action. I'm looking at my code. Okay, so now we got to get that word that inspires the subject. And we're going to say print. Oh no, hold on. Oh, action. Jumped ahead. So we got the D100, so action equals event, meaning action. And I just reuse some of the variables, that's all. D100. Print. F subject. And we're gonna, and I should probably change these to using two different. And we'll put action. But it works, so I'm not going to fiddle with it right now. I don't want to make it not working. I will when I'm off camera. Input. And basically what this does is, because it loops, when you see we write the main statement, you're going to see I have it set in like a continuous loop. So this basically just pauses, lets me, if an event happens, it lets me read it before we go into automatically choosing a new chaos factor, a new this, a new that, right? So that's all this is. Enter to roll again. in, right? So that's all that is. So that's the whole event. You know, so that's that whole function right there. So if an event happens, I'm going to basically get what type of an event, and I'm going to get 2 words for it. Okay? Any questions? So I'm going to take a little break. This is part 1 of showing you how I am learning Python, and by doing it by creating this oracle that I can use in my solo role-playing games. And I always have a little laptop when I'm DMing a game, and so this could be running in a little shell. So if I got a question and I'm like thinking, I don't know how to answer it, I can go in here, run this real while I'm talking to the players, and it'll pop up, and I can give them a yes or a no. You know, like if they've gone to these are you're going to use this all the time if you're solo role playing, but if you're a game master, sometimes, you know, your characters, your players might get to an area you haven't really defined out yet, or maybe you're like, okay, we're somewhere now. You know, my players went somewhere. I got no ideas. Well, you can use this. You can just go into this. You can always override, you know, because as a game master, you should be trying to up the ante in the game, right? You're giving your players opportunities to be hero. A game master is not if you're like, oh, my job is killing my players, you're an idiot and a horrible game master. Okay? That's what I'm telling you. Because you're supposed to be playing a game. It's supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be painful. You're not supposed to be Monty Hall giving out gifts either, but you're supposed to be creating this story where the players can be the heroes. You know, together you all are writing this great, you know, novel. Think of it that way. So if my players do something stupid, I smack them. You know, if my players do something or take a chance, or, you know, a lot of times I've seen game masters who, if your player comes up with a novel idea and it's going to defeat the trap or the puzzle, they get upset, you know, and to me, that's not right. If that you're wanting your players to come up with those are going to be the stories, right? Those are going to be the things that you're like, oh man, I had this puzzle and I spent 3 weeks and I thought I had this and I thought I had that. And then my player decided to use a water spell in a really weird way. And maybe, like, you know, what you would do is, if you didn't know, well, should they be able to do that with this spell? You could use that. You could use an oracle and say, okay, what's the likelihood of this going off? You know, somewhat likely. Okay. You know, and you could all remember the default chaos is always a 5, and it goes up if they lose, you know, puzzles or battles, and it goes down if they're successful. So, you know, but you can always just use a 5, okay? And then you're like, what's the likelihood of this? Somewhat likely. You roll the dice, it'll give a yes or a no. And you could say, okay, yeah, you could probably do that, you know. So that way you're more fair. The players shouldn't feel like you're out to get them, right? Because then it's going to be players against you, and they're going to be trying to derail your railroad, which I don't believe in either. But so that's just my 2 cents. Who am I, right? But so this is part 1 of the video. I'm going to do another part 2 where it'll probably be a 3-part video, because the code in this thing, it's and I'm still fiddling with it, is let me see. The code in it, let me go down to the bottom. you know, it's 200 lines of code. So we're halfway there. So I'll probably go one, maybe two more videos because a couple of the areas we're going to want to slow down in. But and this was a lot of this kind of stuff, which we're done with the lists and the arrays. We're just going to now be interacting with them. Okay, so hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you like the programming videos. Like I said, I'm not an expert at Python. I have been coding for, I don't know, 40 years, more than 40 years, you know. Last few years I haven't, since I've been disabled. Uh, you know, here and there, I'd pop in, do a little bit. Like I had a Jetson Nano and, you know, did some coding in that and fiddled around doing some machine code. I was getting into emulation and writing some games for the Atari 2600. But yeah, so hope you like it. If it's I'm sorry if it sucks. You have a great day. Bye bye.